Okay, welcome back to the Pipeline, our weekly show. We're experiencing some technical difficulties. Derek Fildebrand is experiencing some technical difficulties as well. That's why he's not here today. But we're getting it together. We got stuff to talk about. We're going to hold it together. James is doing a great job upgrading our gear, and we're getting better all the time. But of course, we always get these hiccups as we go. And they wait for the live show to all come on to us, of course, not during the recorded stuff when it'd be easy to cope with. So thanks for your patience and hanging in there. I want to get back to where I was earlier, I guess introducing Dave Naylor, our news editor, and Jackie Conroy, our reporter, breaking up the old white man lineup that we typically have in here. So yes, you got more flavor on the panel this week, and there's stuff to talk about. And thanks to subscribers, I'll get right to them, and thank you. It's been going really well. We're getting more and more subscribers, more readers, listeners, and it is allowing us to upgrade our gear, even though it doesn't feel like it today. It is much better than it had been, and we're going to carry on getting better. So thank you for those who have subscribed. And if you haven't already, get onto the Western Standard online, take out a subscription. There's a free trial. You can try it out. There's some great news on there. There's some great opinions, all sorts of exclusive content. None of that mainstream media garbage that they've been feeding you for some time. It's time to move on to better platforms. And believe it or not, we are it, despite our technical hiccups today. So as well, sponsors, they've been really important to us, and they've been great. And as you guys keep watching, we can keep selling space to speak to you. And Resistance Coffee has been sponsoring these shows for quite some time now. They are a great little outfit. They're Western. They are coffee roasters, and they take 10% of any of your purchases, and they'll put that towards causes that support your freedoms, like the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, things like that. Unlike some other businesses, you go out and buy a blanket or a towel, and you find out that part of your money went towards some crazy woke left-wing cause or something that you never wanted to support. Well, you don't have to worry about that with the Resistance Coffee Company. These guys will support causes that you agree with, and they got some great names for their coffees. Liberal Tears and Black Gold for the dark roast, and Empty Promises for the decaf. Great guys, give them a try. You go to resistancecoffee.com and you put in the promo code Western Standard, all one word, and you get 10% off that first purchase. So that first time they'll ship it to your door, you get 10% off that. 10% more is going towards a good cause. It's winning all around. Support them. They'll keep supporting us.
Don't forget the Western Standard code.
Yes, Western Standard in the promo code, all one word. Yep, and you'll get that 10% off. As well, our other sponsor is the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. This is really important. These guys have been working hard behind the scenes, and now they're getting front and center. I mean, we know that the Liberal government wants to take away your property. They want to take away your right, your ability to go out and own firearms, use them responsibly, of course, and to consider them as property. So these guys have been standing up for you, fighting for you, and they need your help too, of course. Though it's Canadian, it's at firearmrights.ca, and if you click on why join us, they'll expand on why and what they're up to. Like, they're actually suing the federal government right now to stand up for your rights to keep your firearms. They're taking them to court. They're doing what they can. If we don't stand up for ourselves, they will take those rights away. That's all there is to it. So be sure to go there, click why join, and you'll see why these guys are doing a great job, and they need more help from people like yourself. So getting on to rights. China in the news a lot these days. The Canada-China thing, our Canadian citizens who are essentially being held hostage in China. There's three that are making the news now. I mean, we've had the two Michaels, and there's been updates on that, and then Robert Schellenberg, there we go, who has now gotten himself a death sentence, which is pretty distressing for drug smuggling in China. So maybe, Dave, if you explain a bit of the stories that are developing over the Canadian-China relations right now.
Yeah, this news just came out of China this morning, Cory. Can't remember when our relations with them have been this bad. Calgary businessman Michael Spavor was sentenced today to 11 years in a Chinese gulag, allegedly for spying. Most of Canada seems to think it's a trumped-up charge. Robert Schellenberg of Abbotsford, British Columbia, on Tuesday had his death sentence upheld in a Chinese court, and we know how the Chinese like to carry out executions, a bullet to the back of the head, and then they charge the family for the ammunition. And there's still Michael Kovrig over there waiting, languishing in a cell, waiting for his sentence. So the Prime Minister came out today and wagged his finger, as he usually does, and says it's unacceptable. Former Tory Foreign Affairs Minister came out, though, Peter MacKay. He said it's time for boycotts. The time for nice words is over, and we should start boycotting trade sanctions, like the Chinese have placed against us, and soya and pork. And he wants a boycott of the Olympic Games. They're coming up very quickly, actually, in February in Beijing, the winter version. He says Canada should not go. And I know, Jackie, you did a story on what the rest of Canada thinks about going to the Olympics.
It is very, very clear that none of Canada really wants this. At the very least, the majority of Canadians have said that they either completely or somewhat support boycotting the Chinese Games, and frankly, I don't blame them. I think it sounds like the two Michaels are being used as bargaining chips right now, especially in that Meng Wanzhou case with Huawei. And the Games are just another example for China to put themselves on the global platform and lie to everyone and say, oh, like, look at what we're allowing to the media to show you. Look at how great everything is. But I think that they're really using the Games for ulterior motives, and I'm not sure Canada should let them do that.
No, I mean, keep in mind the Canadian Parliament criticized, in a historic ruling, criticized the government of Japan for genocide and their treatment of the Muslim Uyghur population. This is
China, you mean?
China, I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said Japan.
Oh,
but,
sorry, Japan. No. I mean, this is a brutal regime. I can't imagine what kind of COVID restrictions they're going to bring in for the Olympics, but they may lock up the entire country. What do you think, Cory? How do we get those guys home?
I don't know. There's so much wrapped up in this. I mean, it is easier to say, stand up to China than to do something too. I mean, whether we like it or not, we're very dependent on them. We get a load of our cost-effective, cheap consumer goods from China, and people will complain, even though they say, "Oh, I'll boycott Chinese goods." When they see their consumer goods shoot through the roof, we'll see how long that lasts. Like, they are a big trading partner for us, and unfortunately, we don't buy enough to necessarily hurt them. Likewise, we're not a military power. So things like, though, the Olympics, I mean, that's a symbolic thing. That's a big thing for China. They want to look good on the world stage. I mean, that's perhaps where we can hit them where it counts and say, all right, we're not taking part in your show to the rest of the world. You're dictators. You're holding our citizens hostage. We won't play ball, and we're going to encourage other nations not to as well. If you want to hold this show, you're going to do it without us, or get your act together with it. But I mean, otherwise, it's a difficult situation.
And it's the only way to get China to do anything is with a coalition of the other like-minded countries like the United States and Great Britain. It's going to take a lot of guts for Canada if they're the first to say, no, we're not going.
And it's cruel to your athletes. I mean, these guys have been training and women for their whole lives. This is it. This is the apex. And you're telling them, yeah, unfortunately, due to the political climate, you aren't going to be able to get out there on that elite competition, that once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's asking a lot. But, I mean, you're saying people don't have much appetite for the Olympics in general these days is what you've been seeing as well, right?
Oh, I would completely agree with that. I mean, IOC corruption has been an issue, I think, long since anyone can remember. But especially lately with these China Games, like, we saw this exact same thing happen with, 2008 in Beijing when they last had the games there. Once again, media was very upset because there were specific areas that they were allowed to film in, absolutely nothing else. Like, it was China's opportunity to really project this fake, fabulous, glossy image of themselves to the world. And Cory, I think you raise a really good point because it's a fine line to toe between, do we want to support this? Do we want to support the Olympics as an organization? Do we want to support China using the Olympics for ulterior motives? But then at the same time, do we really want to say to Canadian athletes who have been working arguably their entire lives for this opportunity, oh no, exactly like what you said, like something that you have no part in and no control over is going to ruin your chances at ever, becoming a professional athlete.
Especially when we're still in a post-Olympic high from Japan. I got that right this time, right?
Yes,
Japan.
yeah, they did do the Olympics. They worked so hard on the years, but
all right. That's Canada did great in those Olympics. And there's nothing better than a gold medal to get the entire country excited. And if we get NHL players going to Beijing, that'll create even a greater level of excitement. But at some point, you need. The Western world put a line in the sand over Afghanistan and boycotted the Moscow games, and then tit for tat, the Russians boycotted Los Angeles. But it's going to be interesting to see whether countries have the inner fortitude to make a boycott decision.
It's too bad that the Olympics are turning into such a political tool. I mean, the ratings are going down with it all the time, too. It's not what it used to be by any means. I mean, IOC corruption, other issues, people have been getting tired of it. Viewership ratings have been going down. Yet at the same time, we saw this time around, I mean, a rotten COVID year, we've all been miserable and cranky, and a lot of people rallied around, some of those athletes who did fantastic, and the women's soccer team, and all sorts of stuff. So, I mean, there's value, but are we going to kill it with our politics? I guess time will tell.
I think you're also raising an interesting point, Cory, because when you Google the Olympics now versus, 5-10 years ago, the stories aren't coming up of athletes as much. It's corruption, it's IOC corruption, it's doping scandals, it's, foreign entities, like we said, using these games for ulterior motives other than promoting athletes. And I think, as sad as it is to say, the Olympics have really gotten corrupt. I read an article not too long ago that said something to the extent of, one nation will emerge victorious, the other will be stuck hosting the 2026 Olympic Games. So it's obvious that people are really starting to see through the IOC. They're starting to see through, like I said, these other entities that are forcing their athletes to dope or trying to use the games for their own motives. I think people are tired of it, and I'm not totally confident that the Olympics has that strong of a future, as depressing as that is to say.
We will see. I mean, and we'll use that to pivot in. One strong supporter in Calgary of the 2026 Olympic bid was Councillor, now Mayoral candidate, Jeff Davison. He was quite the pusher for it. And speaking of crowds of people in red, as you see in China, Jeff Davison was in a crowd of red T-shirts on the weekend at a rally, which was pretty interesting. Maybe you can expand on that, Dave.
Sure, and it involved another Olympic booster, Mirnahed Nenshi.
Yes.
This was a kickoff rally for Councillor George Shahal, who was running in the Northeast Calgary riding of Calgary Skyview in the election, whenever it's called. He kicked off his campaign on Sunday with a fairly large and boisterous rally of Liberals. I guess in terms of size for Calgary, it was a good Liberal turnout. Amongst the attendees was Mayor Nenshi, who unsteadily climbed up and down the back of a pickup truck to deliver his speech. And watching on, interestingly, were mayoral candidates Jeff Davison and Joyti Gondek. Now, as you said, Davison has always portrayed himself as a bit of a fiscal conservative. Gondek, on the other hand, has always been a left-wing leaning person on council, and somebody Mayor Nenshi, I think, would like to see take over from him. So, the question is, has Davison changed his political stripes? Western Standard reached out to him, and he basically said he was just there visiting a friend, supporting a friend, and that's really all he said. But it certainly leaves, the voter with what seems to be a clear options now. You've got Jeremy Farkas who is definitely a fiscal conservative, and then on the other side you've got Liberal rally attending Jeff Davison and bring back COVID masks Gondek. So it's the political lines are certainly being drawn.
I mean, what you read into this? Do you feel perhaps Mr. Davison was always a secret Liberal, or is he changing as he goes? Or
I think it'll be interesting because I remember his initial run for mayor, against Nenshi the other year. And he came out as one of the only fiscally conservative candidates. And so I feel like the wool was kind of pulled over my eyes because I have been keeping up a little bit with his latest ventures and everything. And he
didn't, just to be clear, he didn't run against Nenshi in the last election. But in his Ward 6 election bid, he was a first-time councillor. He voted he campaigned on a pro-business, fiscally conservative.
And we do see that so typically. They campaign conservatively because they know that's what the electorate wants. And they lie. I'm going to be blunt about it. They lie. I'm sick and tired of it. I mean, Nenshi did it. He painted himself as pro-business, fiscally conservative. He was nothing even close. Davison, once he got in, he voted for just about every spending increase that came along. I mean, if there's anything City Council hated, it was when the Manning Institute started actually tracking voting and showing how these guys vote, because they could get by under the radar if people weren't paying attention. But if you could see how they voted, like, holy cow, this person isn't conservative whatsoever. But usually they keep it hidden. This was unusual to see Davison. I mean, you can make your excuse, so I'm just helping out a friend. Look, in politics, optics are everything. Helping out a friend, if you're at his house, if you're at a party or something, but you were at a Liberal campaign kickoff and you were a person running for office. There's no other way to interpret that than to say you're supporting the Liberals in Calgary. I mean, you can't paint that both ways. So that means he must be targeting support in that segment. But
another one of Shahal's friends is Jeremy Farkas. He was invited to the rally, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, not with a 10-foot pole." He instead went to talk to voters in Bowness Park on a lovely Sunday afternoon. So yeah, I mean, optics are everything. Mayor Nenshi told the crowd that Calgary is not very well served by its federal voting intentions or past, saying that the fact that people like Kent Hare were voted out and replaced by Conservatives does not serve Calgary at all, because in a minority government they have no voice.
Well, that's the usual Liberal threat, and I find that so offensive when they pull that stunt, and it's true. I mean, we saw that going farther back in past federal elections. Every time Calgary wouldn't vote Liberal, they'd pull something else out. CFB Calgary is gone. CBC headquarters are gone. And their candidates would keep saying, hey, if you want stuff from Ottawa, you got to vote Liberal or we're going to punish you. And that was Nenshi's underlying threat, basically saying, hey, Ottawa's going to keep screwing you if you don't vote Liberal.
There's a weird dynamic developing in Calgary. This is going off on a bit of a tangent, Cory, and I apologize, but Derek's not here, so he can't.
What are you going to do about it?
He can't pull me
Derek's
back
away,
in.
the mice will play.
Exactly. But I mean, you've got interesting divisions in Calgary where normally pro-business conservative organizations like the Chamber of Commerce have all of a sudden decided they're going to lobby to bring back vaccine, or to bring in vaccine passports. It really is an interesting dynamic happening all over the place. And will Calgary vote differently this time in the federal election? Are they happy with Trudeau's COVID handouts more than they're unhappy with Bill C-69 and 48?
We'll see. I mean,
We'll see.
We got quite a political fall coming ahead of us for political dorks like ourselves. We've got the municipal election. We've got the federal election. We've got a couple of referendum questions coming up on it.
And don't forget the Senate election.
Yes.
Speaking of which,
Which
Calgary
is forgettable, but
Calgary Senator-elect Doug Black resigned today. He won the Senate election in 2012 and was appointed the next year in 2013. So all may not be lost in senator and waiting elections.
we'll see. Do you think Justin Trudeau might appoint one of our chosen senators given the chance?
Well, I was just going to say, do we even get an election? I thought Trudeau just came in and decided for us. I didn't know that we still had the benefit of an election
we go
anymore.
through the motions.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll close up and move on to something a little, getting under the provincial matters. And it was a lot in the news in the last week with the rural crime and crime in general, self-defense. That interesting case in Red Deer, the gentleman didn't get charged, but now we've gotten more details on exactly what kind of happened up there last week. And you can let us know a little more what we've learned.
Yeah, when we were talking about this last week, it was just breaking news. RCMP had released the fact a homeowner shot an intruder to death, and that's really all we know. I mean, nobody's written about a rural crime more than you, Cory, and you know it's a huge problem out there, a continuing problem. And we now have some more details in the case. And this was I would think, a disturbed individual who had gone back to the same house 3 times over the August long weekend. He had been taken away by the RCMP on 2 other occasions. One time he was just released, another time he was charged with mischief and released. And then he went back, kicked in the door, and the poor homeowner arrived to find the door open, and this guy sleeping in his bed. The guy was woken up, grabbed a baseball bat, and started to beat the hell out of the homeowner. Shots to the head and body. The homeowner was able to grab a shotgun and shoot the guy right in the torso and killed him instantly. Now we all worried, much like the Maurice situation, that the RCMP may decide to charge the homeowner. And I think everybody breathed a sigh of relief when they decided not to, that there was an obvious case of self-defense. So I wonder why, Cory, I mean, you covered the Maurice case extensively. Why would they make a different conclusion than this one?
I think there's a couple of reasons, and I guess I'll do the self-serving plug. I interviewed Eddie yesterday on video, and that'll come out in the next few days, and talk to them for a while on this, because of course this is certainly a case near and dear to him. And those who don't remember, Eddie Maurice was charged with injuring an intruder with a firearm when the intruder was trying to break into his home, and he had to go through 6 months of hell through the court system before they finally dropped charges. But I think in a couple of fronts that were different. Well, for one, there's been a lot of examples. They just can't get convictions on these. They keep trying, but they can't get convictions. When it goes to jury, they really don't have a chance. It gets tossed out, so they understand that. I think they're figuring that out. The other part was, in this particular case, it was kind of clear-cut. You know, this man was fighting for his life. He was being beaten by a weapon. He was in his own household. It was a known offender who was doing it. Like, they just realized what a morass they're going to get themselves into if they tried charging this man for defending himself in this case. So it was hard to compare. But it was a good outcome as far as a tragedy can go. Perhaps, though, I mean, you feel we're starting to get an atmosphere where self-defense is a little more acceptable, or?
I was just going to say this particular case was very reassuring to me, because I do believe that the culture is starting to shift more towards not blaming people for defending themselves. I think it was very, very cool that the charges wouldn't have been upheld, because, like I said, I think strongly, especially within, RCMP, everything like that, the culture has been, wait for us, don't you dare do anything, don't you dare try to fight back, because if you do, it could potentially be swung onto your fault. Just wait for us to do everything. And as you've said many times, Cory, in rural areas, 40 minutes is a really, really long time to wait with someone threatening your life in your house.
Beating you with a baseball bat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Do you think this means it'll be open season, Cory? On bad guys?
I don't think
in rural Alberta?
So necessarily. I think those who were inclined to defend themselves are still going to. I mean, the law wasn't going to stop somebody if they're afraid for their lives, but at least they might feel a little more, less fear in what ifs. I mean, you talk about those things. There are contingencies at home. Jane and I talk about that. We live rural. We have a lot of crime in our area. My bar got robbed repeatedly. We were worried at that point. What would we do if somebody came in? It's like a fire drill. What are you going to do? What are you going to go? Well, we'll try and warn somebody, and if worse came to worse, we'll do whatever we have to.
Exactly. But you're still not allowed to carry pepper spray, Jackie.
Oh no, couldn't possibly, a tiny little thing that gives no lasting damage, couldn't possibly. It would be better for me to get beat up than possibly spray someone with pepper spray.
Well, one thing I would throw out there, I mean, you can get pepper spray if you're going hiking and you want to go in, and you could pick that up for bears. And you know what, if it comes to a case of somehow you utilized it in self-defense, we can see that even a firearm is considered legitimate in the right circumstances, not frivolously used. I'm certain that if a young lady happened to pepper spray a would-be rapist, she probably wouldn't be charged.
Yeah. There was actually video out of California this week of a bear that got into a grocery store and was wandering around a grocery store. So, if those people had bear spray in their purses, they'd have been okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, and it's less lethal. The world's not full of psychopathic citizens who want to go out and harm people in self-defense. I mean, there's a number of them, but we aren't overloaded with them. And empowering us to be able to take care of ourselves, I don't think is as big a gamble as the authorities seem to feel. But I think it's a police mentality, and I mean, and that's added to talk now about a provincial police force.
Yes.
Whether or not that would change, though, or are we going to have a smaller version of the same thing? I guess that depends on what our government puts together if we ever do it.
The Todd Lowen, the independent former UCP MLA for Central Peace Notley, That always confuses me. Came out with an interesting idea today. I mean, the Premier has said any decision on the provincial police force will come from Albertans in a referendum. Todd Lowen said, well, you know what, let's just give the referendum vote to people in rural Alberta, those that don't have municipal police forces like in Calgary and Edmonton and Medicine Hat. And I think that would be a very different vote, because if you're a citizen of Calgary, you may not have ever dealt with the RCMP other than a speeding ticket, and don't know what it is like to wait for a 40-minute response time.
Well, absolutely. There would be a different perspective without doubt. And again, it'd have to be done right. So that's a big if, but
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, though. Anything done through government is full of red tape, inconsistencies, like not putting budgets where they really need to go. I think the idea of saying, okay, so we have this issue that was caused by government, let's use more government and try to fix it, seems slightly counterintuitive.
Yeah. My old colleague Leisha Corbella wrote a great column this week after the Red Deer area incident, basically saying the RCMP doesn't answer to anybody in Alberta. They answer to Ottawa. And, this was when the RCMP threw their usual cloak of secrecy over what exactly had happened in Red Deer and why this guy was allowed to go back 3 times to the same property. Maybe a provincial police force would have more, have to answer for themselves more than the RCMP.
Well, I know one of the challenges with RCMP too is that they get trained and they get transferred. Like most officers in rural areas came from often another part of the country, and they don't know what the local challenges are, the local issues are, the local troublemakers, community policing. I understand there's a reason a bit for it. I mean, corruption. If you grew up and it's a schoolmate, you might be more inclined. I mean, there's challenges, but take somebody from urban Montreal and throw them into northern Saskatchewan and tell them to serve. It's going to take them a year before they even realize what they're working within. So, I mean, localizing police service, I think, can only help in the long run. But I guess we will see.
I do agree it would probably increase accountability.
I would think. I mean, people are, some of the differences, the fear, the dislike of police by some. I mean, we certainly see with our Black Lives Matters activists and calling for defunding. And there's some of the irony I see, though. I mean, defunding is ridiculous. I mean, to the ones who they want abolition. I mean, they're very extreme. But there are some cultural issues with police. You'd think they'd be embracing, this is an opportunity then. This is where we can build a force from scratch and try and fix some of the problems we saw inherently in the last one. But
sure. And just look how defunding has worked in some of the major American cities where they've seen triple-digit increases in crimes like homicides and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so,
Portland, Minnesota, it failed dismally. It's just not reasonable. Again, there's stuff to fix, but cutting their money off. I still like that one. The response, if people think we should defund the police to make it better, I feel the same way about nurses and teachers. If we just cut them by 10%, they're going to improve. Nurses are going to be better. Teachers are going to be better. So let's get on that. Now, before the hate mail all floods in, maybe I'll bring things to a close today. So thanks for joining us. I should speak again to our sponsors and to you watching. If you're on YouTube, we really need to get this rolling. Share these videos. We got other ones coming out, all sorts of content coming. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe on YouTube. Like us on Facebook. All those social media things are important. Our Twitter account. You're listening on the audio, on the podcast, give it a like, give it a review. And of course, subscribe. It's really, really important. And as well, be sure to visit our sponsors. I'll go over it again quickly here. Resistance Coffee. They're at resistancecoffee.ca, I believe. I don't have our screen there. But these guys are great. They're not woke. They are standing up for individual freedoms. They're a local small business. They'll ship the coffee to your door on your very first order. When you put it in, I bought the stuff, I drank it. It's good coffee. You get a little window there for a promo code. And you put Western Standard, all one word, all lowercase. You get 10% off that first purchase. Try it out. Give it a taste. You'll find out, again, they're good, humorous, fun coffees, and they actually taste good. As well, the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. These guys have been at it for a while. They're standing up for your rights to own, use firearms, and now perhaps they'll speak a little more. Something firearms owners have been a little almost sheepish about. Self-defense is a legitimate use for one. I mean, it potentially is not, in every circumstance, but we can't rule that out. And that gentleman in Red Deer might not be alive today if he hadn't had a firearm on hand. So firearms can save lives as well as take them. And the firearm coalition they speak to those things. They speak of our rights and the value of responsible firearm ownership. So go to firearmrights.ca, click on why join us, and you'll see why they can help you out and why it's important that you support them. So thanks again for tuning in today throughout our little bits of bugs and everything. Perhaps Mr. Hildebrand will be back next week.
Unless he stubs his toe again.
Yeah, or whatever.
Whatever ailment he's got.
Piles or,
Hemorrhoids?
Well, if I can speculate. It was Taco Tuesday yesterday. But I'll close at that. I've got to end with some degree of distaste. That's for those who managed to stay with us right to the very end today. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.